Day 119 to 11:02 a.m. Southern Walls, Mountain Base, Mount Malabito, General Nakar, Quezon. Atop the walls, several people could be seen talking to the person at the center. Obviously, it was Huey's group that was very happy to see Mark's return. Since the current situation was kind of discouraging to everyone, Mark immediately asked the details. Hearing about the things that happened after they left made Mark frown. But first and foremost, 28 days, huh? Mark murmured. Although he knew that it was plausible and Huey's group was telling the truth, his body and mind seemed to reject the information. After all, in his body clock, only a few days had passed. Even though it could not be denied that the day and night felt longer in the spirit dimension, it was just still a couple of days. Probably, this was what people that accidentally entered the spirit dimension and managed to return felt when they got back. The difference in speed of time was surely disrupting their body clocks. It was the same when they first entered the spirit dimension. All of them even ended staying up for more than half of the first night. So, boss, what are we going to do? Huey asked. He was very hopeful that Mark could do anything about his fog and the danger that seemed to lurk in the shadows. Though it was really not the fog that was the problem. The issue was with their dwindling supplies. I can deal with this fog, actually, Mark said, which surely delighted everyone, but then, they were surprised. But leave it be for a while, he said with a smile. Why? Jolene asked. Of course, they had no idea what was going on inside Mark's mind. Who would have thought that he wanted to fatten the chicken before eating it? Since the fog was created with magical energy and was gradually growing, would it not be better if he absorbed it with its already filled? With those things in his mind, Mark replied, I have a better use for it later. The problem is the supplies, right? I'll personally go out and hunt to procure food. All of you just stay here. From what I feel, as long as this fog is around, everyone is safe. Just don't leave the walls of the base, though. Everyone was confused as he did not tell them the actual reason. However, it was enough of an answer for them as the trouble would be addressed by Mark, personally. Furthermore, they could not deny the last sentences he said, either. Since the fog appeared, there had been no interference in the base from outside. There were no enemies, no people, no animals, and no infected. It was kind of depressing that they could not see the sun, though. This felt worse than spending cooped up inside the house because of a strong storm. As for Mark, he was not just speculating the safety of the surroundings while the fog was active. When he sent Ignis to scout the fog, he felt the demon sword go back and forth a few times. And when it managed to go through, he lost his it and was not able to detect it anymore. Mark was not worried about it, though. He could still feel his connection with Ignis, albeit weak. Furthermore, even if he concentrated on widening the range of his detection, he could not feel anything through the fog at all. This fog, for sure, was isolating the whole base from anything outside. While they were talking, Mark felt Ignis re-enter the fog from the opposite side that he sent the sword to. Moreover, Ignis was hurrying towards his direction. In a few seconds, they were able to see a strange silhouette of a flying object through the veil of fog. The silhouette made Huey and the others a bit afraid, thinking that it was an enemy. But when they finally saw it clearly, they calmed down. It was just Mark's demon sword. They became afraid because its silhouette had a strange shape. And it was because Ignis was carrying something on its blade. Honestly, seeing a flying sword carrying another sword was kind of hilarious. But when Ignis placed the sword in front of Mark, everyone noticed that it was not just some kind of odd-looking sword. It was actually a sniper rifle and a sword combined together. Just where did you get this? Mark said as he tinkered with the sword. The interest in his eyes could not be concealed. It was a sniper rifle and a sword. Either he or May could use this. Furthermore, even though the weapon was kind of big, it was not overly weighty. Though, because of its weight being light, the recoil of this gun should be strong. It could not be used by just a regular human. While Mark tinkered with the weapon, everyone went silent. After all, they could tell that Ignis was telling him his findings. Who would not notice if the sword was flying around like a child reenacting a fight scene in a movie they watched? Hearing everything from Ignis, he could say that the enemies could probably monitor if something was able to go in and out of the mist. Or else, Ignis would not be ambushed just like that. Fortunately, Ignis was far from what he was before. Stronger and sturdier. However. Master. Come with me. Let's kick their ****. The voice of Ignis echoed in Mark's mind. Sure enough, he could not admit that he would be defeated. Unfortunately, he was a sword meant to be wielded. Although he could fight alone, without any support and strength from its wielder, it could easily be pushed back like what happened to him earlier. Furthermore, it was not like that the two were just some thugs, either. The shadow leader, Chaya, and the lone crazy dragon, Huo Long Yu. Both were commander ranked in Ouroboros. Even he had no chance to get close to them before, being nothing but a member of the outer circle. This time, he was able to contend against Huo Long Yu and take him on with a bit of surprise. If Chaya had joined the fight, Ignis would have fled immediately. Fortunately, it was not the case, as it was known that both of them hate working with other commanders or lower positions. The attitude of the two during the encounter showed it. Well, fight them later, not now, you should settle down. Mark sternly reprimanded Ignis, making it stop in place and tilt its body forwards. Sure enough, the sword was feeling down. Seeing that, Mark felt laughing. You can wait for a few days, right? It is better to haul in a net when the fish gathered. Hearing that, Ignis felt excited. It seemed that Mark was planning to deal with all the enemies in one go. Okay, I'll wait, Ignis said. Then, tell me what you know about the two. I'll also ask Spera later if she knew something. Mark then turned to the others. Also, all of you. Go home and rest. Even with the fog, the eye bags of all of you are visible. Hearing that, Huey laughed while the girls touched the lower area of their eyes. They could not tell whether Mark was joking or not. However, they did have less time to sleep these past 3 weeks. If not for the nourishment in their bodies coming from Chio, they should have collapsed long ago from fatigue. Taking heed of Mark's orders, they all said goodbye. With Mark here, they felt more assured. They would surely get a good rest starting today. On the other hand, Mark, who was left with Ignis atop the wall, started to formulate his plans. And to start it, he should feed the Tikbalangs. Not with food, but with the crystals he had just taken from the prisoners. Also, he should check the camp of the enemies to at least gauge how many strong ones were there. But even before all those, he should go out to hunt dinner first. Thus, making Ignis return to his sheath on his back, Mark turned into a black mist that made its way through the wall of fog. **********Day 119 to 11:25 a.m. Daraitan Elementary School, Barangay Daraitan, Tanay, Rizal. After some time since they left to check, Chaya and Huo Long Yu returned arguing. I tell you, deactivate the Fet Fiata, I need to get my weapon back. Huo Long Yu shouted. Absolutely not, the leader's plans are not going to fail because of the likes of you. Who said that you should be too complacent about yourself in that fight? Losing your weapon is your fault. Only yours. The whole plan had nothing to do with it. The subordinates around were watching the two. As no one tried to interfere with them, it seemed that this kind of thing happened occasionally. Hey, all of you! Huo Long Yu shouted at the emerald-robed ones that were still amidst the ceremony. Furthermore, it was noticeable that they were missing another person. This time, on the west side. Make a hole for me to get through that Fet Fiata. I need to get inside. Hearing Huo Long Yu's demand, the elder of Tuoth Day stepped forwards. I apologize, your sire, but you have no authority to order us. Huh? Do you think that I have the time to joke with you? Huo Long Yu shouted with an intent to threaten. No, I am not joking. The elder was unfazed. You sire definitely had no authority to order us. The leader told us to follow no one else but Madame Chaya's orders. FCK. Huo Long Yu cursed as he turned to Chaya and stared hatefully. Chaya would definitely not let him. It was clear by her smug expression that could be seen despite her black complexion. "You two are really funny." A voice suddenly interrupted the two. As there was no one from the subordinates that would dare to say that to them, they were sure that there was an intruder. Chaya and Huo Long Yu immediately took a battle stance towards the direction that the voice came from. There, they saw a small fox sitting on the roof of a classroom, overlooking everyone. It was a white fox with red markings on its body. The most noticeable was the 3 tails it had. Seeing the fox, the two, who were arguing, relaxed their postures. However, the frown on their faces could not be hidden. "What is an envoy from the Japanese branch doing here?" Chaya asked the fox. With that question, the fox jumped off from the roof, and with a bright light, No, she landed. A beautiful woman with an alluring body landed instead of the fox. She had white hair, fox ears, and 3 fluffy tails, indicating that she was the same fox that jumped off just now. Like everyone here, she was also wearing a robe, albeit a white one with a silver lining on the seams. The woman looked at Chaya, Huo Long Yu, and panned her eyes across the vicinity. She then spoke. "I was sent by the Empress to search for something." She then turned towards the east, where the Fet Fiata was present. "But it looks like you people from the Chinese branch had beaten me to it. You even employed the Tuoth Day on the field. What is it to you?" Chaya said with contempt. "This place is already under our jurisdiction. You better stay your paws out of it." "How rude." The fox woman shrugged. "I'm not a busybody to meddle with anyone's affairs. But I can't just return like this, or the Empress will blame me. I'll stay for a while and see what your leader will do." "No, you better return where you came from," Chaya ordered. "However, I'm sorry, I may be of lower rank, but I am still under the direct order of the Empress. You have no authority to order me." The fox woman said with contempt. "Peeved." Chaya heard a snicker behind him. She could not help but send a kick. Unfortunately, Huo Long Yu, who was already laughing, managed to evade. Although he was still angry for the loss of his weapon, it was still mood-lifting to see Chaya being slapped like this. Day 123 to 2:21 p.m. Outside Fet Fiata, Mountain Base, Mount Malabito, General Nakar, Quezon. Chaya and Huo Long Yu appeared at the southern side of Fet Fiata in the fastest speed as they could. However, they could only click their tongue in frustration as they reached the place. It had been the 2nd day for this thing to happen, the 3rd day, in fact, including the time they encountered the intelligent sword. There was someone, or something had broken in and out of the Fet Fiata, and for a mysteriously annoying reason, they could not find the culprit. Not even a trace was left behind, making them unsure of what was happening. Not only that, but the events were disturbing their plans, horribly, and also made them fear an unknown factor interfering with the things they prepared. Furthermore, the worst thing was that every time the Fet Fiata was disturbed in this manner, the ongoing ritual was being affected. In these past days, they already had quite a few of Tuoth Day fall because of the backfire. Although they should be able to recover in about a day or two, these missing members made the gathering of energy slower and more unstable. If this continued, the Fet Fiata might get weakened. This event was one of the things they did not want to happen. But what could they do aside from getting frustrated? The culprit was nowhere to be found at all. It seemed like they needed to push other measures to guard the perimeters of Fet Fiata. Unbeknownst to them, the culprit was overseeing them from above. Mark flapped his wings silently above the 2 enemies that Ignis described to him, concealed from their eyes using the photokinesis mental crystal. He was playing with the enemies at the same time that he was hunting for animals. It was rather unfortunate that both Spera and Ignis had no idea about this mist. From the looks of it, it was some sort of measure from the inner circle of Ouroboros. That was why he investigated it a bit yesterday. He managed to find the base of the enemy rather easily. It was because they did not bother to hide at all. The more or less 200 members of Ouroboros camped at the elementary school of Daraiton. Seeing the school made him remember the people that decided to dwell there. By the looks of it, They were all gone now as Mark could not detect other humans in distress. It was rather unfortunate. Since those people managed to get this far and live this long in this deadly apocalypse, their abilities should be above average. If some were still alive, they could be of use to the base after saving them. Sadly, there was no way for that to happen as it was Ouroboros that they were talking about. If this organization saw humans as livestock, it was even though many of their outer members and subsidiaries were humans. If they could not find a human useful or of value, it was already lucky to be turned into a slave. Dying in their hands was not unexpected. Worse, they would become food for the creatures this organization was rearing. The base camp was found. Unfortunately, he could only observe from afar. There was a barrier around the school, which Mark did not dare try to touch. He did not know what this thing would do, but most plausibly, it was put to detect intruders. Mark did not want to disturb the enemies as it would implicate his plans, either. Nevertheless, he managed to find out what was happening every time he or Ignis was making a hole from the mist. Unfortunately, they could not do anything about it and ended up alerting the enemy every time they get out. They could tell Spera to open a portal for them, but since the number of times she could use the portal in a short time was limited, they better use it for emergencies. And of course, even though it might affect the plans a bit, Mark found annoying the enemies little by little quite fun. Their frustrated faces were rather comfortable to look at. After all, these same people caused some difficulties for his people. They should also feel the same. The only thing that Mark was quite wary was the third party. Every time these two appear, there was a mysterious entity tailing them. However, this entity had no intent to meddle. Mark could feel that this entity had already found him, and he found it too. After he watched the two robed figures leave in frustration, Mark turned to another direction. There, a white fox with 3 tails could be seen sitting on a branch of the tree while staring at his direction. It was even though he was still under the effect of optical camouflage. After a few seconds, the fox turned away and jumped off from the branch, following the two robed figures. Mark wanted to know what it wanted, but it could wait for some time. Now, he went out to capture animals for a meal for the next days. These past 2 days, he only scoured around the mountain for animals. However, it seemed that the disturbance in the mountain scared away the animals, leaving a few ones. The worst thing, however, was that he found many mutated infected wandering in the mountains. It was not surprising. The Fetfiada was like a vortex gathering magical energy. And the infected found this kind of energy very attractive. With the amount of energy gathered, it could even attract the more sensitive infected from miles away. Furthermore, after another month, the infected sure have mutated further. Many of them already left their human-like figures from before, turning into total monsters. There were still parts that told that they were previously human. However, without those parts, no one would be able to notice at all. This time, Mark decided to fly rather far away, probably near the east coast. Some seafood might be a good thing to eat, considering that they only had animal meat these past 3 days. The amount of fruit and vegetables they had in store was also dwindling. Unfortunately, Mark could not gather an amount that would be able to satisfy everyone. After all, he had other things to do. As Mark neared the Marquina Infanta highway, he had to stop. It was because he saw something rather interesting. An infected was walking down the slope of the road. Like the other infected, Mark saw that were roaming on the mountains. This was highly disfigured. It was definitely a predator-type infected. The infected still had a human torso. However, its limbs only had the first segments left. From the elbows and knees, there were no arms or legs. Instead, there were 2 pairs of scythe-shaped blades made of white bones covered in bloodstains. It ran fast in all fours in a manner like a cockroach. It wiggled its body away while running because of the lack of joints on its bladed limbs. As for its mouth, more than half of its face had been torn apart, allowing its jaws to open up inhumanly wide. Green, slightly acidic saliva dripped off from its mouth. These kinds of infected roamed the mountains now. To Mark's measure, many infected had already reached the standard of being a level 3 mutation. It was the measure used back in Arielis to measure the strength and capabilities of the infected. The worst thing, however, on that planet Freed and Aphelia came from. Level 3 mutations only appeared after 2 years of the outbreak. It meant that the mutation of the infected was too fast on Earth for some reason. Luckily, Mark already made a base in the mountains where the infected found it quite hard to climb. With these infected around, the settlements and survivor bases near the cities should be having a hard time. Another good thing was that compared to the infected in Arielis, the infected on Earth was far dumber. The psychic infected had slower growth, but their intelligence was rather high, being able to build enclaves and such after some reached level 4. As for the infected here on Earth, despite their level 3 strength, it looked like that their minds only evolved to the same level of predatory animals. If it was not the case, Earth would definitely be doomed without being able to prepare. Even the organization called Ouroboros would not have a good time dealing with the psychic infected. Mark landed near the infected, causing it to notice him immediately. Without pause, the infected charged towards him. His visage then vanished into a black mist, appearing and disappearing at several intervals. When he appeared standing behind the infected, it fell down. It was not dead yet but was restrained by black metal that restricted the movements of its body. It tried to create loud noises as it tried to wriggle out of its restraints. However, Mark had already appeared in front of it with his blood whip, covering its mouth. The blood then turned into metal blocking its mouth. Mark checked the thing he caught. This was not for food, of course. He was preparing to deal with the incoming enemies. This infected might not be intelligent but would definitely cause a ruckus if released into the ranks of the enemies. He was not worried that once it was released, it would attack his base. The infected were attracted to magical energy, after all. It would prioritize the enemies that had much of it than his people that were mostly humans hiding behind the walls. This infected was not the first one he caught. In fact, there were more than a dozen already. All of these infected were being trapped outside the walls in the east area. That part was yet to be removed and was still filled with trees. Using the abilities of the Tikbalangs were proven useful there. Furthermore, it would be used to direct the infected Mark caught towards the enemies. Leaving the newly caught infected in a secure place, Mark continued on his way. He also passed by the area where he could see the new Infanta settlement from afar. Because of the fog, they had lost contact with the outside world, including radio transmissions. The military there might already be worried, but who told them to worry? Mark was confident that he could deal with the situation. It was not the right time to serve the dishes yet. Mark soon reached the port of Real, the former military settlement here in Quezon province. Sure enough, there was nothing but ruins here. Mark managed to see a group of survivors who seemed to be scavenging, but it looked like that their search was rather bad. Ignoring the group, Mark landed by the port. He pretended to look around the water to see if there was something that he could catch. However, there was no need to look. A giant evolved eel, about 10 meters in length, jumped out of the water. Its 2-meter diameter mouth opened up to devour Mark whole. That caused a commotion that alerted the survivors nearby. As the eel jumped several meters in the air, the survivors immediately ran away, thinking that the monster might see them. They did not notice Mark at all. And then, the eel fell. Dead. Ignis flew from Mark's back, stabbing the eel on its forehead midair. Now, how am I going to carry this? Mark murmured. Even the gemstone May traded from Bathala would not be able to store this monster. In any case, he caught something worth several days of food for the whole base. That was what mattered for now. ******. 2 days later, after the frustration cat and mouse events for Chaya and Huo Long Yu, what they were waiting for finally arrived. At the center of their camp, the energy was disturbed. Then, black-colored lightning cracked the space open. A very unstable portal appeared. Several figures appeared through the portal, and everyone, including Chaya and Huo Long Yu, prostrated in respect. Day 125 to 7:47 p.m. Daraitan Elementary School, Barangay Daraitan, Tanay, Rizal. The sky was already dark when every member of Ouroboros was alarmed by the cracking of space. They immediately gathered as it was the signal that their leader would arrive. Before the portal could widely open, everyone had already gathered to welcome the arrival of their leader. Once the unstable portal widely opened, several figures came out of it. Leading the group of 11 people was a man that seemed to be in his early 30s. He wore a long dark blue-colored Chinese robe with golden embroideries and a mark of a golden dragon at the center of his torso. On his head, there was a black hat that had the shape of a boat. From how his clothes looked, it seemed that it had a style of a civil officer in the Qing dynasty. The man's face was pale as a corpse. However, for a very contradicting manner, his body exuded a thick aura of vitality. Still, the stitches that were present on his neck and the line on it indicated that this person should not be a living one. Behind him were 10 people who moved in pairs. They had the same kind of attire, but less gallant, and a talisman that hung from their hats covered their faces. They did not walk either but jumped behind the man as they followed. As the man stepped out of the portal, Shia humbly spoke. "We welcome the arrival of leader Tan Saitong." Everyone prostrated. Sure enough, everyone here respected the man, and it was not from fear. The man also seemed to not look down on anyone even though they prostrated in front of him. Nevertheless, even though he seemed to value his subordinates, the darkness in his eyes could tell that he would not hesitate to abandon them when needed. A kind but sinister person, that was how everyone here knew this person was. If he saw that a person was of value, he would not hesitate to cherish them. Lose that value, and they would not be worthy of his glance. Tan Saitong was a different person when he was still alive. However, as his death and resurrection tainted his body, the previous him was no longer present. After all, he failed to kill the robbers because of his lack of strength, and died because of it. As the group stepped out of the portal, Tan Saitong looked back as the portal immediately closed. This portal is very inconvenient. It took 2 weeks to set up and needed a lot of virgin sacrifices. Yet, it only opened for several seconds. Tan Saitong said with a tint of annoyance in his voice. He then turned to his subordinates and spoke once more. "All of you stand up. Shia, Long Yu, I need more information about our goals here." "Thank you, Leader Tan Saitong. Please follow us," Shia said as she led the leader back to the place they prepared for him. They prepared the room rather lavishly compared to the surroundings of Daraitan. There were soft couches, expensive types of furniture, and even charms that exuded vitality. They did put a lot of effort into this as it was hard to find such luxuries in the mountains. But of course, in the eyes of their leader, this was rather bland. Shia knew that, and such, she immediately said. "I apologize if it was not to your taste. It is rather hard to gather better things as we can find nothing much here but mountains." Tan Saitong took the center seat in the room without saying anything. The people behind immediately scattered, standing in different directions of the room with their backs on the walls. Shia felt relieved seeing that, and thus, they reported everything that their leader needed to know. After half an hour, Tan Saitong closed his eyes in contemplation. "I see," he said. "There is an unknown factor in that place. It is possible that whatever it is, we will have to face it. To be able to go in and out of Fet Fiada, it seemed to be a strong one." "Leader, do we have to prepare about it?" Shia asked. "Definitely. Being prepared is far better than not." Tan Saitong nodded. "But leader, what are we going to do? We can't transport new weaponry of call for reinforcements now, can we?" It was Huo Long Yu that asked this time. There was no need. Tan Saitong shook his head. Then, he waved his right hand towards the two, making 100 yellow paper talismans flew out of his sleeve that landed in a stack in front of them. "Capture some soulless ones. I will lend you these aids for this mission." Tan Saitong said, making 6 of the people that came with him jump forward. "Put the talisman on the head of the soulless ones, and they will activate it. We configured those talismans to control the soulless ones for a day before burning out. Gather the strongest that you can, but do not use those talismans immediately. Prepare for another day, and we will start at night of the next day after." Yes, leader. We will accomplish this immediately. Chaya and Huo Long Yu replied together. Then, all of you are dismissed. Tan Saitong said, which made the two go out with the 6 aides lent to them. Are you done eavesdropping? Tan Saitong said. Then, a person entered through the window of the room. To think that the vice leader of the Chinese branch personally led this. That shadow woman and that insane cultivator were too tight-lipped to tell. The fox lady said as she leaned on the window. You sure had the guts to stand like that in front of me. Tan Saitong was offended by the conduct of the fox. I only bow down to my empress. Tan Saitong glared at the fox. State your name and your business here. The fox lady smiled slyly. Where are my manners? This one's name is Yukine, vice leader of the Yuki Kitsune under our empress. And for my business here is no different from what you all are here. But do not worry. I will not meddle in your affairs until you all are finished. Of course, Tan Saitong did not favorably take the last sentence. You seem to know something. Tan Saitong immediately picked up what Yukine meant. While I do know something, I can only tell that to my empress. The only thing I can say that even if you are all defeated, it's just a matter of bad luck. Well then, if you excuse me. Yukine then jumped out of the window, leaving Tan Saitong frowning. He did not like what that sly fox just said. It seemed that he needed to prepare more things than he thought, or that sly fox would not give such a statement. Foxes are known for feasting on vital energy, and thus, they were capable of sensing such. It was very likely that the fox already found out the factor that was unknown to them. Unfortunately, she was directly under the empress. Or else, Tan Saitong would have captured her to squeeze out the information even if she was a member of another branch. I'll just have to prepare this in case. Tan Saitong murmured as he rubbed the ancient-looking ring on his finger. As he touched the black gem on it, several jade bottles appeared in front of him. It might ruin everyone, but it doesn't matter. We needed to know the source of that metal and capture the spirit tree. He said as he opened one of the bottles. The smell of medical efficacy seeped out in the room. However, instead of a calming and fragrant one, it smelled like blood and had a sinister feel to it. Inside the jade bottle was several fingernail-sized balls. The balls had a sinister red color. It was called berserk pills. The research of berserk medicine had reached different branches which headed towards different results. And to the Chinese branch, they managed to create medicinal pills from it. However, it was far from being medicine. It was a kind of evil drug that could mutate the individual that consumed it. And worse, could also affect the infected once they ingested it. It would not cause the infected to raise a level but would make the infected gain new abilities. I should also tell them to capture some consumable pawns. Tan Saitong murmured with an evil thought. Day 125 to 7:49 p.m. Moden Base, Mount Malabito, General Nakar, Quezon. Early in the night, Mark was currently in his workshop. He was eating dinner while he worked on 2 identical bracelets and a ring. Mark had trained all the blood children to be able to transform into armor or weapons. That was why they needed fewer items to carry around. However, it was different for things like May's sniper rifle, the ammunition, and other stuff that could not be replicated by the blood children. Thus, he decided to use the 3 space attribute gems that May traded from Bathala. 2 were bracelets because Mark and May already had rings. The last ring was for Spera, who was the one that led May to that encounter. With these spatial items, it would be easier to carry things around. Unfortunately, the space was quite limited. However, there was nothing they could do as these gems were rather rare. It was very likely that Bathala could not even create something like this, or he would have used it to trade for more energy crystals. While Mark was working, Spera suddenly came into his workshop, huffing. Master. I felt a fluctuation in space just now, about to the southwest of the base. What kind of fluctuation? Mark asked. If it was just a tear in space, it should be fine. It felt like a forcefully opened space. The fluctuation was quite violent. I only felt something like this before when the China branch of Ouroboros is experimenting on some ancient magic circle. Hearing that, Mark pondered a bit. Of course, it was not hard to assume what was happening. I see. Mark smiled. Don't panic. Maybe the one leading the enemies finally arrive, but they won't make a move too soon. Is that so? Spera asked, tilting her head in confusion. She thought that it was rather urgent, and such. She rushed towards Mark. To see him this calm, maybe she was worrying too much. It's okay. Go back and rest. If I notice some changes, I'll be the first to move out. Okay, then. Spera finally retreated. Of course, there were still doubts in her mind. But seeing that Mark was unfazed, then, it should be all right. As for Mark, why was he confident about it? Mark shook his head with the thought. These past days, he riled up the enemies so much that they were too wary. Even if their leader appeared, they would not attack without preparing. He was not just playing with them. While he did that, he was reading their emotions, reading their thoughts, observing their reactions, and analyzing their personalities. That way, he could buy more time before the enemies attack. Furthermore, they would not attack immediately, even after surrounding the base. It was because it was clear that the Ouroboros needed something from here. Before they kill everyone, they would want to obtain those things first. Unknown to them, the person who solely foiled their plans in Bay City was the owner of this base. If they did, it was doubtful that they would only prepare that number of people. However, when that thought passed his mind, he realized something. Well then, I guess I should check them later after I finish these things. He murmured as he felt something that was not right. But as he said that, he froze. He suddenly turned his head towards the east, his eyes glowing with a purplish light. Not good. The Amika and the others. Day 125 to 8:47 p.m., New Infanta Settlement, Banugao, Infanta Quezon. The New Infanta Settlement, it was the largest survivor settlement in the Quezon province. It was the result of the two settlements merging after the disaster that happened almost 2 months ago. And now, despite the initial struggles, they were doing better than before. This settlement prioritized agriculture because the land, in and out, were already prepared for agriculture. Prioritizing crops that could grow to maturity in less time needed. In another week or so, they could start their harvest. Greeneries covered the southern and eastern areas of the New Infanta Settlement. This situation made everyone think that they were doing fine in the apocalypse. Well, of course, disregarding the constant appearance of mutated, infected and evolved animals. They had been used to it, after all. Unfortunately, shadows lurked this time around. They could wish that trouble came knocking at the door. However, the problem they were facing decided to stay as silent as possible. Gray-robed people ran in the shadows, obscured from everyone's sight. They moved fast from the southwest side, where the edge of the Agos River flowed. What was the reason for them to appear in this place? It was because their leader, Tan Saitong, made an order. In 2 days, they would start to surround the Fetfiada, and thus, they needed to move as soon as they received the order their leader has given. The order was to procure humans, as many as they could find. They did not know what the leader wanted to do with them. Not that they could question or care about it either. Their duty was to follow the instructions of those higher than them in the organization. Nothing else mattered. However, where would they find humans in this place? The only answer was this military organized settlement. Learning about that, Tan Saitong sent another two of his aides. These two had a different mission than the others. There was one thing that military settlements had around the world. It was the facility where they researched things after the apocalypse started. In that case, any research material and scientists were valuable assets to everyone. Their current findings would be usable in any way. Make use of anything of value. That was one of Tan Stong's views after he died. Resources, people, and even ranks. As long as it had value, he would make use of it. When their value deteriorated, then it was time to dispose of them. And thus, Chaya and Huo Long Yu split up for 2 different missions. Chaya would deal with the procuring of mutated infected, while Huo Long Yu would gather the humans they needed. On the farm field of the new Infanta settlement, many shadows flashed as 75 members of Ouroboros rushed towards the settlement. They evaded the oil lamps installed around the place to make the area visible and not difficult to guard. These installments around that kept the place lit at night were one of the things that made the new Infanta settlement even more secured. Nevertheless, it only worked on the mindless infected and animals with low intelligence. As for the members of Ouroboros, they passed through it rather effortlessly. Reaching the newly made walls that did not even reach 3 meters in height, their shadows flashed up the walls, scaling it without problems. Some led the way and appeared behind the soldiers that were guarding the walls. The soldiers felt their presence and the danger they brought after they appeared. However, it was already too late. Even though some of the soldiers managed to turn around, they all fell unconscious. The shadows hit the back of their necks without holding back, causing them to fall. Then, they dragged the fallen soldiers off the walls, bringing them to the riverside quite a distance away. As those went back with their catch, the others dove straight towards the dwellings. Man or woman, elderly or children, they dragged away any human that they saw. The members of Ouroboros effortlessly gathered humans as they went back and forth. It took no time, and they already gathered around 100 people. Compared to the population of the settlement, which reached thousands, it was just a small number. But all these people were taken away without the military noticing. They were doing their work silently and efficiently. At the northern side, Huo Long Yu and the 2 aides jumped over the roofs as silently as possible. They were heading towards the elementary school where the military encampment was located. The laboratories, for sure, were placed in these parts of the settlements. The moment they landed inside the walls, they took down the guards without hesitation. 5 guards who patrolled the front gates of the school fell bleeding with a slash on each of their necks. "This is easy," Huo Long Yu said as he licked the blood off his hand and kicked the body of the soldier he had just killed. Regular humans were weak in his eyes. Especially those that rely on the military and cower in fear. He found them disgusting. Strength, it was what anyone needed. However, no one could achieve it when they rely on others to live. As for these soldiers, people fear them because of their guns. Without these weapons, they were nothing either. Huo Long Yu moved forwards, leaving the dead soldiers, but then, he felt danger. Black smoke suddenly surrounded him and the 2 aides. They all tried to jump away, but the smoke followed as if it had a mind of its own. The smoke pushed the 3 together as if wanting to consume them in one go. The chill that Huo Long Yu felt as he saw the smoke reminded him of something. As such, he took out a medallion from his hand. Then, the medallion shone brightly in the night, creating a barrier of light around Huo Long Yu and the 2 aides. As the smoke touched the barrier of light, it started to vanish. Seeing the situation made Huo Long Yu felt relieved. Still, it seemed that it took a toll on his medallion. There was a small nick that appeared on its edge. Huo Long Yu stored the medallion and turned forwards. The 2 aides stood in front of him in a battle stance. In front, a silhouette of a person stood calmly. His red glowing eyes were staring at them. Huo Long Yu could not fathom what was happening. There was no doubt that this person was an enemy. And yet, why did he not alert the people of New Infanta settlement if this person found them? However, there were no questions asked. The 2 aides jumped like the jumping corpses they were. They charged towards the person in front in an aggressive manner. To see the aides like this, Huo Long Yu realized one thing. This person was dangerous. Jiangshi, it was what was these 2 aides were, similar to their leader. However, these 2 were not intelligent ones but more like puppets. They had no emotions and would only wait for orders from those that were authorized to order them. There was only one thing that could make them react, and that was the feeling of danger. This act also made these 2 very formidable foes. As they respond to danger, it was hard to hit them with attacks. Even Huo Long Yu would not be able to land a punch against 2 if he was to fight them. Well, he could not just stand and watch. If the 2 aides were moving like this, it was better if he made his move too. The 2 aides swiftly moved their arms in unison. Every move, A small knife flew out of their sleeves, flying at bullet speed towards the person standing before them. Tang! 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 Multiple metallic sounds rang across the school grounds as more than a dozen knives were blocked effortlessly. The person waved his sword as if bullets were nothing to him, not to mention these knives. Seeing the sword, however, Huo Long Yu lost it. It was the same sword that took his weapon. Then he realized. This person must be the one responsible for their struggles in the past days. Before Huo Long Yu could shout his anger, the man suddenly vanished. Tang! A metallic sound rang beside Huo Long Yu's ears. He felt a chill in his back as he heard it. That sound was loud and clear. As he turned his eyes towards the source, he saw the blade of the strange sword just an inch away from his face. What was protecting him was one of the aides that were supposed to be charging forward. The aide was now wielding a short sword that came out of nowhere. Huo Long Yu jumped back and retreated. That was very close. Huo Long Yu lost his cool for an unknown reason and almost lost his life. Tisk! Huo Long Yu heard the person click his tongue. That made him realize. His sudden loss of temper might have to do with this person. A mental attack, he gulped. Huo Long Yu was ill-prepared for this. He never thought that he would encounter a user of mental attacks in such a backward country. Then, he breathed deeply. His inner energy rose into his head, dispelling any foreign effect, returning his mind into its former state. The assailant frowned at that as he jumped back to avoid the attack of the other aide. One was using a sword, and the other was using a chained whip. They jumped fast and accurately, dealing with the enemy before them. Following the enemy, the two aides did not make any pause to attack. Furthermore, every time the enemy attacked, they would dodge it flawlessly. It was the same even if the man disappeared again and appeared behind to aim for a supposed blind spot. It was like the two aides had eyes all over their bodies. The two aides were holding things better than Huo Long Yu. However, that was not what mattered at the moment. It was because the battle caused a commotion. Bang! 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 Sounds of gunshots echoed across the settlement from the residential area. It seemed that some competent survivors managed to detect the members of Ouroboros that were abducting people. Clang! 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 The sound of a bell rang after. It was the sound indicating intruders in the settlement. Soldiers went out of their quarters as soon as possible. They were armed to the teeth and ready to kill. That was when the soldiers in the school found the commotion at the schoolyard. Stop! Raise your hands! One soldier shouted as he aimed his gun at the four. However, the soldier could only groan in the end with his eyes wide open. A knife had already flown towards him, stabbing his neck. "Who are you to order me?" Huo Long Yu said with disgust in his face. He then looked at the aides currently dealing with the enemy. As for him, he decided to deal with the incoming soldiers. These weaklings had no right to step in the battlefield. He said with a frown filled with disdain. Bang, bang, bang. Rat-a-tat-a-tat-a. The death of the soldier caused the ire of the other soldiers. They did not shout anymore and just fired their guns at Huo Long Yu. In response, Huo Long Yu charged towards them. Waving his hands in front, he was catching the bullets that were supposed to hit him. Catching enough, he flung the tips of the bullets back to the soldiers. One by one, they fell because of the unexpected way of counterattack. Some managed to dodge, however. Huo Long Yu was already in front of them. Huo Long Yu tapped the chest of the soldier lightly. It was a very light hit. Yet, despite the bulletproof armor the soldier wore, he crumpled to the ground with his whole chest sunk in. At this moment, the other soldiers present in the schoolyard started to feel panicked. And then, Huo Long Yu jumped back 2 times. 2 attacks came towards him unexpectedly. The first was a green, thorny vine with flowers that tried to tie his feet stealthily, while the other was a punch from another person. After dodging, he looked forwards. From the second-floor balcony, there was a green-haired little girl. In front of him, a tall Caucasian man had his one knee on the ground as his hand left a crater after hitting the ground. Day 125 to 9:01 p.m. Military Camp, New Infanta Settlement, Barangay Banugao, Infanta, Quezon. Mark fought physically with the two jumping corpses in front of him. The two were very sticky opponents. Dodging, blocking, counter-attacking, and even charging forward and retreating. The two corpses coordinated too well and fought too smoothly that anyone would forget that they were nothing but moving dead bodies. But to say, Mark was enjoying the company of the two. After all, he never had any proper training, and his fighting style was nothing but a mash-up of things he self-studied. It was a way to train his muscles to fight with these two, who seemed to be only able of physical fight. Furthermore, the two corpses were able to cope with his enhanced body after he awakened his ancestry of being a blood demon. It was a good thing for him to have proper training partners. He could play a little bit with these two. After all, with the chaos that ensued in the settlement, Mark had nothing to do here anymore. The future already changed. Back in the workshop, Mark's eyes blurred as he got a vision. The clairvoyance he had that would only activate at random times and when something was going to happen to the people close to him, and it would not show any vision for trivial matters. The only times that it activated was when something very crucial or something concerning death would happen to them. And he could not deny, but Amika was one of them. Not only that, she fought by his side several times, but her personality and trait as a mutator were very pleasing. She was annoying at times, but it was just a part of her charms as a child. However, this night marked the start of her supposed suffering. The Ouroboros abducted people from the new Infanta settlement stealthily. It was a very successful mission for them as they managed to get a lot of people. Worse, the military only noticed it after hours the mission had ended. People disappeared, many died hidden outside the walls, and worse, Amika's family were also gone. Sherville was a capable scientist. Among the scientists that the military had, he was one of those that had been able to come up with good results after the apocalypse. And thus, after seeing the research, the enemies would take him to work for him. And of course, he would not just accept that. As such, they would use his sister, niece, and nephew to force him. The first example was to force Amika to swallow a pill. She was the most active in protecting her family, being noisy and resisting, and such. The leader of the enemy did not fancy her. Swallowing the pill turned her a beautiful green-haired child into a hideous vine monster. Worse, it did not change her into a savage beast, keeping her consciousness intact. If anyone was to mutate that way, it was better if it also destroyed her mind in the process. They made her suffer like that to force his uncle to work under them. The vision Mark saw was clear as spring water. Like before, it felt real, and he could feel Amika's emotions. He found it very unpleasant. It was as if it was choking him. Even though she became a monster, she did not cry outside. She insisted on protecting her brother and mother, forcing the ire of the enemies unto her. Inwardly, she was in pain. The body she turned into felt pain in every movement. Having her body like that was torture. And yet, she did not voice any of it. Her many eyes under her leaves glared at the enemy with resolution. She would protect her family at all costs. What she felt did not escape Mark's vision. It was as if he there beside her, and thus, he would not let it happen. Mark immediately asked Spera, who had just left his workshop. He needed a portal towards the new Infanta settlement. Not only that, it was the fastest method of travel, but it would not alert the enemies like how it did if he created an opening through the mist. And thus, he appeared at the outskirts of the new Infanta settlement to change the future once more. He was together with May and Amihan, who would serve as his backup from outside. The two would also be in charge of alerting the people of the enemies. Aside from what happened to Amika, the vision gave Mark a good thing. It was the close-up figure of the enemy leader and his aides. Without the enemies even knowing, he was able to see their leader and his subordinates. He knew how many jumping corpses were there, and he now knew the face of the leader of the enemy. Furthermore, he heard their plan to use these people and infected to deal with his base. It was good to know as he had the same idea. It looked like he needed to do some tweaks on the infected he imprisoned and not send them as is. Asterisk 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 Mark waved Ignis to one of the two Jiangshis. Of course, it evaded the attack smoothly while the other took the opening to attack him from behind. He kicked the ground, backflipping, and evading the chain that flew towards him from his back. He spun his body into air, trying to cut the chain. It caused a loud clanging sound, but even if Ignis was a demon sword, the chain only received a few scratches. The Jiangshi wielding the sword jumped from in front, charging towards Mark, who was yet to land. With the sword pointed at him, it tried to pierce his chest. Mark twisted his body, causing the sword to pass an inch before him. He then grabbed the head of the Jiangshi and smashed it to the ground as he landed. Bam! The dirt sunk in a small crater formed with the head of the Jiangshi at the center. While the attack smashed the ground, the head of the Jiangshi was unexpectedly still intact. Furthermore, it slipped out of Mark's hand, leaving its hat, keeping the talisman still stuck on its forehead. It then spun his body with one hand, using the other that held the sword to cut Mark. At the same time, the chain came hurling at him once more, trying to wrap on his body and constrain him. Bam! Cling! Mark kicked the chains away and slapped the flat side of the sword, forcing it to the ground. Using the same hand he used to smash the head of the sword-wielding Jiangshi to the ground, he pushed himself away from the sandwich of the two. He smiled. Fighting like this was enjoyable. And to say, he already got his goals here. One was to change the future. The other was to test the enemies. He already saw the leader and these jumping corpses from his vision. He already saw Chaya and Huo Long Yu. The only thing that he had not done until this time was to test their abilities. Why? Not because he wanted to know to be able to protect his base. What he realized this time when he returned was that he was not the only one that needed to grow stronger. In the upcoming confrontation in his base, he would try to make a safe environment where he would allow his people to learn. He would benefit from absorbing the energy that created the mist, while his base would have experience thwarting a siege. In that case, he needed to measure the abilities of the enemies. And this time was an adequate opportunity. It was kind of unfortunate that the shadow woman named Chaya was not here for the test. In any case, he would just deal with them when the time came. As for his other abilities, he would not use it this time. He would only use the things he showed when he returned. After all, that fox that was always watching was around. Mark could not fathom what it wanted. It was just watching without hostility or any notion to face him. This behavior made it hard to guess what its goals. However, as long as it did not show any hostility, Mark was not going to confront it. If he started to find it annoying, however, he would not hesitate to eliminate it together with these robed annoyances. While Mark played with the two Jiangshis, Huo Long Yu faced two people. Emika was supposed to be the victim. Yet, she was now fighting with the person who was supposed to abduct her. She stood on the second floor using her vines to distract the Huo Long Yu. On the other hand, the person with an alias of Ogre, the mercenary Jones Galley, faced with Huo Long Yu. Huo Long Yu was a rogue cultivator. He was more powerful compared to regular people. Strong enough to see the speed of bullets and even catch the ones from assault rifles flying towards him. Yet, Jones Galley, who was supposed to be nothing but a mercenary, was able to cope with him. Emika's vines crept towards Huo Long Yu, trying to constrain him. The latter waved his hands with a bright light, slashing the vines into pieces. At the same time, Jones charged towards Huo Long Yu and punched. Huo Long Yu, on the other hand, smiled with ridicule as he released a punch of his own. His slight tap could sink a bulletproof armor worn by a soldier. A punch from him could pierce the armor of a tank. If a human received this attack, he would explode into pieces. Boom! Huo Long Yu's eyes turned wide. The two punches they threw connected with a loud boom. Yet, Jones Galley was still standing with a smug smile on his face. Huo Long Yu retreated in a hurry as he knew that something was not right. Even mutators with enhanced bodies would not be unscathed after receiving a punch from him. You? Who are you? Huo Long Yu asked. After all, it was clear that Jones was of another country's forces. He did not look like a Filipino and more of European or American origin. "Isn't it rude for you to ask my name without introducing yourself first?" "Well, in any case, I don't mind." Jones smiled. "My name is Jones Galley. A mercenary." Hearing the last word, Huo Long Yu felt smug. "So, you are paid to fight here? Why not join us? Have you heard of us, the Ouroboros? We like to take talents. We can pay you more than what you can get here." Huo Long Yu was quite confident about this. In his eyes, mercenaries were nothing but money huggers. Pay them more, and they would go from enemies to allies. But then, Jones Galley smiled with ridicule. "Don't make me laugh. The Ouroboros will take me and let me join?" Huo Long Yu suddenly felt confused. Then, Jones charged towards him once more with his fist that shone with a glossy metallic hue. Huo Long Yu retreated. Bam! There was nothing that the punch hit, but the air trembled with a strong wind. "I've been fighting with your organization for the majority of my life. How will your superiors let me join you? Ha ha ha." Huo Long Yu was shocked by that statement. "Your people chased after me for a long time and every single one of them, I killed," Jones Galley stated. And then, Huo Long Yu remembered the name of the man laughing in front of him. His eyes turned wider. "It seemed that you realized." Jones smiled. "Let me reintroduce myself. My name is Jones Galley. But they also call me SSPO 18367. One of the few survivors of the experiment that your organization conducted on innocent orphans before. And the only survivor of your organization's Super Soldier project." Jones then adjusted his fist, getting ready for a better fight. "Now tell me, how do you want to die?" Day 125 to 9:07 p.m. Military Camp, New Infanta Settlement, Barangay Banugao, Infanta, Quezon. A super soldier, Jones Galley's declaration rang in everyone's ears. His reveal surprised everyone, as well as Mark, who was dancing in his current battle. Huo Long Yu, who currently fought with Jones Galley, felt a bit choked. He was a higher member of the Inner Circle and one of the commanders in the China branch of Ouroboros. Even so, his knowledge about that incident was quite limited. After all, it was an accident that the elders of the organization tried well to hide. The Super Soldier Project. It was one of the organization's projects that started long ago since the end of World War II. There was a substantial increase in human orphans at that time due to war. It was the perfect time for the Ouroboros to start many of their projects. There was only one goal for those many projects. The members of Ouroboros was limited. The increase of members was not constant due to its rules. It was to make humans fight humans. Super soldiers were a thing that scientists researched for a very long time, and not only by the organization but also by many militarized countries. The scope of creating these one-man armies was remarkably extensive. From using highly technological equipment and highly specialized training routine to a more inhumane experiment such as adding mechanized body parts to a human or mutating the soldier's genetic makeup, the tests were far too many. In the case of Jones Galley and the Ouroboros, they played with genetic enhancement. It was to create genetically enhanced soldiers that would not break down compared to the other kinds of experiments. Soldiers that would be able to regenerate injuries, having superhuman bodies, and specialized in taking down large enemies despite being alone. That was what the Ouroboros wanted to make. Decades passed, and since the start of the projects, the other projects displayed distinguished results. From being able to train spies, assassins, and geniuses in many fields, they made their cultivated personnel back into human society. They even managed to find a good number of psychics among the orphans. The Super Soldier Project, however, failed in almost everything. Genetically enhancing humans was not as easy as they thought. Children were the best candidates for these experiments. It was because their bodies were still adapting to their growth and their environment as they grew. It was also easy to manipulate their mindsets and train compared to adults. This fact, however, came with an enormous consequence. The bodies of these children reacted highly to the mutagenic substances and genetic enhancers they used. The human genome was mostly the same for all people. However, DNA was unique. and both of these affect the changes in the amount of the substances to be used on the children. And to learn about the exact dosage, they had to experiment. In each experiment, the handlers of the project wasted at least one life. Administering too much would immediately kill the children. Using too little would not amount to anything but minute changes. In these two instances, they considered the children as failures. Living or not, they had to be disposed of as they would not have any value to the organization. Due to all these failures, the death toll of this project was the highest. It could even surmount the deaths of the other projects combined. That was how lethal and hard the experiments were. There were a few times that they managed to administer the right amount that had a substantial effect on the body of the child. Nevertheless, the child would still die because of the insurmountable pain they felt and shock from ongoing changes in their bodies. Using anesthetics and other kinds of pain reliever was not plausible either, as it could affect the experiment. Thus, everything went into failure. It was until the mid-1980s. By a stroke of luck, a miracle occurred. Despite the pain and suffering, a child managed to survive. The experiment was successful, and the child was very obedient. A strength that was abnormal for a child, or even a human to have. He was resilient as the dragons, strong as an elephant, fast as a cheetah, and ferocious as a lion. In every test they conducted, the results made the handlers of the project more delightful. The whole project focused on this miracle with all their resources so that they could present him to the organization. And 3 years after the success of the experiment, the child was already 14. They sent the child into a field mission to prematurely start a conflict in the Soviet Union. But that was the turning point of the Super Soldier project. After they arrived at the site of the mission, the obedient child suddenly revolted. He killed all those that accompanied him in that mission and escaped. The organization sent many of its personnel to track down SSPO-18367 and capture him. However, the said child was a successful experiment for the project. Too successful that he was able to take down the threats sent to him. If he could not kill them, he could escape any time he wanted. No one was able to bring back the child until he finally vanished from the site of the organization. Even so, they still sought for the child. Every time they got a lead, the person searching for the child would also vanish. After that failure, the handlers of the project tightened their measures to control the children. It was to the point of hypnotizing and brainwashing them before the experiment. But the miracle of SSPO-18367 never happened again. Until they shut down the project for incompetence, another potential super soldier never appeared. Furthermore, from time to time, SSPO-18367 would appear. He did nothing else but to thwart their plans, killing their members whenever he could. ******, who would have thought that the very same child in that story would appear here as a mercenary hired by the Philippine military? Nevertheless, this fact did not faze Huo Long Yu. Instead, he was quite delighted. "I see. The crazy dragon," Huo Long Yu smiled. "If I bring back your head, then the organization will surely reward me." With a maniacal laugh, Huo Long Yu charged forwards. Then, like a beam of light, his footsteps brought him in front of Joan's galley in almost an instant. No one was able to see how he did it. He stepped forward, vanished, and appeared in front of Joan's galley. It was like an eclipse. "Full moon fist!" Huo Long Yu shouted. He moved his fist in a circle, glowing like a full moon, before releasing it towards his opponent. The combination of his eclipse-threading footsteps and moonlight fist, no one had been able to counter it aside from those with higher cultivation levels from him. It surely caught Joan's galley off guard. The glowing punch connected to his abdomen and sent him sliding backward. His feet raptured the earth below him as he tried to stabilize himself, which he was able to after he slid back for about 5 meters. This scene made Huo Long Yu frown. One of his fiercest attacks hit Joan's galley squarely. His fist left a burning hole on the clothes of his opponent. Yet, he was still standing, and his body did not have any injuries at all. "Is that what is all you got?" Jones ridiculed as he ripped his torn clothes off from his body. "My turn then." Bam! Jones' galley kicked the ground, making a loud bam and leaving a thick cloud of dust. Like a fierce animal, Jones' galley pounced towards Huo Long-yu with another punch. The latter reacted by jumping backward. But unlike the former's previous straightforward punches, even though this one still had the same ferocity, it was nothing but a feint attack. The fist turned into a grabbing claw that grabbed the right leg of Huo Long-yu. With its tight lock, Jones' galley bashed the cultivator's whole body down to the ground. Boom! It was as if a shell from a cannon of a tank impacted the ground. The body of Huo Long-yu crashed with a crater fitting his whole body. Crescent moon kick. With a shout, a foot covered in glow caused an impact against the metallic arm of Jones' galley. Tam! The ear-piercing sound echoed as the kick forced the super soldier to let go of his opponent. Huo Long-yu jumped out of the crater. His mangled clothes showed that the attack was strong, but his body was still unscathed as he protected it with his inner force. Nevertheless, Huo Long-yu could not accept something. He realized it. Huo Long-yu and this super soldier was a complete match. No, he was weaker than Jones' galley. As a cultivator, Huo Long-yu relied on his inner force when fighting. Too much usage would empty it in the long run until he could recover. On the other hand, Jones' galley was purely relying on his body. He might get tired but not any sooner than Huo Long-yu expending his inner force. And when that happened, it would be the end of the line for him. You two, help me here. Huo Long-yu shouted towards the two jiangshi that were fighting with the mysterious man. He did not care about the man with the demon sword anymore and just wanted to defeat this super soldier. But to Huo Long-yu's dismay, the two only their heads towards him, and continued to fight the man with the sword. That was when he realized another thing. While the two jiangshis would follow his orders most of the time, on the battlefield, the two would only fight the most dangerous enemy. Then, if the two ignored the super soldier in front of him, it meant that the man with the sword was far more dangerous, too dangerous that it needed the two of the jiangshis to fight together, and possibly, even more. This time, Huo Long-yu knew that the mission was a failure. He could only do one thing. Retreat! Huo Long-yu shouted, which echoed across the settlement. Everyone heard the voice. Whether it was the members of the Ouroboros, the military, or the survivors that were panicked by the gunshots, they heard it. Although it might seem like it was declaring their movements to the enemies, it was the opposite. The people of the settlement did not know whose voice that was forcing them into a bit of a stupor. It made an opening for members of the Ouroboros to retreat. Along with that shout, Huo Long-yu confidently declared, "I'll remember you two. I'll take your heads next time." Leaving those words, Huo Long-yu kicked the ground, vanishing and appearing like a ghost in every other step, appearing before the jiangshis. The two jiangshis then threw two spherical bombs on the ground, releasing thick smoke in the surroundings. Swish! However, within the thin smoke, a voice rang. Ga! Thu! Thu! Along with that shout, another two sounds echoed with a rustle as two sniper bullets pierced through the smoke. When the smoke vanished, Huo Long-yu and the two jiangshis were not there anymore. Nevertheless, they left something behind. From the spot where they vanished, a severed arm and two destroyed talismans lay on the ground. The man with the sword brandished his sword covered in flames, burning the blood on its blade. At the same time, a beautiful woman with bat wings and a small fairy flew towards him. 3 women followed the two behaved like servants. Jones' galley was quite disappointed. He let the enemy go. However, they were just a match in terms of strength. There was nothing he could do. Still, he wondered why the other party let those members of Ouroboros go when he could surely kill them if he wanted. On the other hand, Emika held onto the railings of the second floor in relief. She was very nervous as she assisted Jones' galley in the battle. Finally, it was over. Seeing the group that was on the field, Emika smiled. "Oi, uncle," she waved with a laugh. Day 125 to 9:11 p.m. Agos River, Barangay Banugao, Infanta Quezon. A silhouette on a man was walking by the riverside, dragging two non-moving corpses using the only arm he had left. Blood dripped from the stump left of his left arm. He traversed the rocky path, cursing unto the heavens. The man was Huo Long Yu, who had just escaped from the battle. F***ck. F***ck. He repeated with deep resentment. The resentment he had was not because of his lost arm, the two bodies he was dragging, or the defeat he had experienced. What he resented was the fact that the enemy toyed with him. The act was not apparent when he was in the middle of the battle, but when he decided to retreat, the man with the sword suddenly grew more powerful and moved faster. Before he was able to react, his arm had already fallen to the ground. There was also the two sniper shots that destroyed the talisman on the foreheads of the two Jiangshis. It seemed that they had the idea to make him leave them behind. However, even if he could lose his life, these Jiangshis were different. Tan Saitong uniquely cultivated these bodies. They were bodies of some of the greatest warriors in his time. They were irreplaceable. Even if he had to leave his dismembered arm behind, Huo Long Yu would not leave these two bodies. With his curses, he reached the area where they should have gathered those that they already abducted. Even if they had to retreat, it was still good as long as they had some people to bring back. And the harsh reality welcomed him. The gathering area was almost empty, only left with ash-covered robes and a few weakened members of Ouroboros. "Sir." The robed shadow person that currently leaned on a large rock called out weakly as he saw Huo Long Yu. "What happened here?" Huo Long Yu asked with a frown. "Where are the people we already gathered?" "Sir. They all escaped. Two women ambushed our encampment." After seeing that, the shadow person's life came to an end. His body turned to ash, and his gray-colored robe fell to the rocky riverside. The mission was a total failure. Huo Long Yu could not deny that anymore. He turned towards the other shadow people. "Gather everyone left, we will return immediately." Day 125 to 9:12 p.m. Military Camp, New Infanta Settlement, Barangay Banugao, Infanta, Quezon. The battle had already ended. Mark stood in the middle of the school grounds together with May and Amihan, who came with him, and Odalina, Aphelia, and Spera, who followed afterward. Since the vision Mark came rather late, he went through the portal Spera made with May and Amihan. Then, he left an order for the other three to get the equipment he prepared and go to a location to disrupt the mission of the Ouroboros further. Thus, with that order, Odalina and Aphelia followed after and went to ambush the camp where the enemies gathered the kidnapped people. And sure enough, they returned successfully. As Mark had already seen what the members of the organization wanted to do with those people, he would not let it happen. He would not care much if it happened elsewhere, and he had nothing to do with it. However, they would use the innocent people they captured against his base and his people. He would not let that happen. The base existed so that he, his family, and the people important to him would have a place to belong. He wanted a beautiful place and environment for May and the others and not a bloodthirsty one that had no value for life. Once the people in his base learned that they killed innocent people turned into monsters by the enemies. Although they would not say it, the scar would remain in their minds. That would affect everyone's way of living, and it would slowly break down the foundations he laid down. He rather not have that happen in his watch. The enemies could come after him and his base all they wanted. Just don't involve innocents that would affect the morale and mentality of his people. Or else, he would not just stand by. Furthermore, one of those people they targeted was someone he favored. As if he would let them go just like that. Odalina, Aphelia, and Spera reported to Mark about the success of the orders he gave. Mark praised them for it. Of course, the three did not accept it just like that. After all, even if the three were able to fight, it was almost impossible to deal with the enemies. It was thanks to the weapons Mark made to deal with these kinds of enemies. The most highly numbered individuals in the Ouroboros were not humans, but the shadow people. Their bodies were almost ethereal and non-physical. The robes they wore had magical properties to be able to be worn by them. In direct words, the bodies of the shadow people were impervious to the usual weapons that humans used against each other. However, while Mark was working in his workshop, he made weapons with parts made of the dying spirit tree that sealed the deity of bloodshed. Thus, these weapons had magical properties that could harm ethereal entities like the Shadow People without the need for magical or psychic abilities. Combined with their other abilities and trained close-quarters combat, just Odalina and Aphelia was able to overwhelm the number of enemies they faced. Not to mention that there was not that many in the first place. The most that the enemies could send to abduct people was a quarter of their personnel. It was because they had other things to do, and they also had to watch out for their current base. Furthermore, the Shadow People that infiltrated the settlement were all scattered, leaving even fewer to guard the abducted people. Thus, because of the interference of Mark and his entourage, the enemies lost miserably in this battle. "Oi! Uncle!" Emika's gleeful voice echoed from the balcony of the second floor of the north building. Seeing how her switch flipped too fast, Mark shrugged his shoulders. She was as lively as ever. Furthermore, no matter how the others started to respect him and even fear him, Emika never changed. She still called him uncle, even smelly uncle whenever she could. She never changed at all. While Mark had those thoughts, Jones approached. "Are you sure letting them go like that?" The mercenary asked. "Why are you asking me? You let them go too." Mark replied, causing Jones to scratch his head. "I just noticed that you were holding back, so I also did." That reply made Mark unable to retort. Mark only wanted to test the enemies and give a bit of a warning. And to get a few benefits as well. That was why he told May to watch out for people with papers stuck on their faces and shoot the talismans if they were about to retreat. In that process, he might be able to get one, in the least, and study the corpse. That was why he also chopped off Huo Longyu's arm to limit what he could take back. But who would have thought that the crazy cultivator would leave his arm behind and take back the two non-moving corpses? It seemed that the two corpses were far more valuable than his missing arm. In that case, Mark did not try to chase. It was not like the enemy would not send those corpses again to him. He just needed to wait a bit more. "By the way, are you sure about revealing that identity of yours like that?" Mark asked with a frown. He came here because Emika and her family were in danger. If that reveal was to attract more attention from Ouroboros, then the move Mark made was for naught. "If you are worried about that, you don't have to." Jones Galley smiled. Ouroboros only moved for either profit or revenge. But the former always came first. I learned that when they started to lay low on chasing after me. I wasted too much of their personnel and resources. With a world like this, it will be harder for them to move around between countries and would take more resources to do so. Hearing that, Mark understood. Going here to deal with you will not only waste resources, but they will also pose themselves to danger, am I right? Right. Going to this edge of the country would not profit Ouroboros at all. And my existence here will pose a warning either. I wish you were right about that, Mark said with his skeptical eyes. Nevertheless, there was some truth to it. Right now, the Ouroboros was targeting his base because of the spirit tree and probably because of other things they deemed valuable. If his base had none of those, the Ouroboros might only think that it was nothing but a gathering of mountain people. Sometimes, wealth and resources could invite trouble. However, it was already late for Mark to dwell on that. He could only shrug his shoulders. On the other hand, Mark stared at Jones Galley. This person being a super soldier that was cultivated by the organization was quite a surprise. But what was more was that Mark was not able to see any of his appearance in his vision. This situation made him disturbed. Then, something entered his mind and tried to test. His eyes glowed purple. It was the ability he had to see a few seconds in the future. And to his surprise, it did not affect Jones. There was no future, and there was no past. This ability of his did not work on only a few people. The examples were Odalina, May, Iola, and his own. People who were supposed to be dead and yet, still living. It seemed like Jones had the same destiny as them. The connection to him and the world's string of fate was gone. No wonder now how he was able to grow strong like this, away from human standards. The atmosphere made by Mark's stare made Jones quite uncomfortable. Thus, he made an unexpected move. "Ladies, how do you like my body?" Jones asked the women with Mark while flexing his highly muscled body. May disregarded everything. She did not even respond with a blink to his voice. On the other hand, the others did not say anything. They looked at him without expression, but their eyes were looking at Jones filled with disgust. Only Spera, who had a problem controlling her emotions, was very readable, and sure enough, she did not fancy it either. "You know that I can kill you just for that, right?" Mark smiled sinisterly. All right, I'm just joking. Just stop those stares." Jones knew that his joke was not that offensive, but for some reason, the response he received was disheartening. "Yeah, old man. Your muscles look amazing, but not everyone had such standards." Emika further broke Jones' heart as she skipped towards Mark and his group. But more than everything, Emika was more curious about something. "Uncle, you added another servant?" she asked Mark as she stared at the new face among Mark's entourage. The new one looked beautiful, and more than that, she looked dignified, serene, and loyal. And to her shock, that servant replied with a smile. "Young Miss Emika. Long time no see. Of course, Emika would be confused. "She's Ophelia," Mark said with a playful grin. "Ophelia?" Emika was confused at first. Then she remembered. "Eh? Ehhhhhhhh?" She shouted like that in shock. It was a very comical manner that everyone around could not help but laugh. Well, of course, the soldiers around were very disturbed. After all, that group was having their fun while being surrounded by dead bodies of their comrades. They were thankful for their interference against the enemies. But still, they should find a better place for jokes. Day 125 to 9:47 p.m. Agos River, Barangay Onaling, General Nakar, Quezon. Emika created quite a commotion after Ophelia introduced herself. After all, the last time the lively Dryad girl saw the loyal maid, she was still in the same size as Amihan. Now, however, it was hard to link this beautiful but stern-looking woman to the cute but silent sylph from before. Nevertheless, looking at Ophelia's behavior, it never really changed. This fact made it easier for Emika to accept it. Of course, she was very curious about how this happened. If not for her family, together with General Faustino appearing in time, she might have started to annoy Mark to get the answers she wanted. General Faustino thanked Mark's group for interfering with the enemy's plan. He did not know how Mark came to know about the situation. Nevertheless, his interference made the settlement avoid the worst conclusion. The abducted people had already returned, and seeing that they almost lost that many people without noticing made them feel ashamed. The deaths of their comrades felt unjustified, but they had no choice but to accept. It was because the enemies came at the time they least expected, and the enemies were not just regular beings either. The soldiers that witnessed Huo Longyu catching the bullets and throwing it back still made their spines shiver. One unexpected thing was that after hearing about the real identity of Jones did not make General Faustino any more surprised. The old general already knew since the start. After all, he was the one who personally hired Jones Galley as a mercenary. But in fact, it was Jones who volunteered to help them as they found traces of the Ouroboros operating in the country. One of those traces was the Death Valley settlement. It might be a gathering of criminals with the founder, who was an international drug lord. However, their backing was the same organization that Jones Galley escaped from during his childhood. While they talked at the school grounds, the cleanup started. General Faustino wanted to invite Mark's group. To their dismay, Mark declined. They still had things to do, after all. Mark's group bid goodbye to General Faustino's group. Emika was a bit sad. After all, her family separated from Mark's group for a long while now. It was the first time she saw them after almost 2 months. Who knows when would she see them next time? With how the world was right now, it might even be forever. However, Mark promised that he would bring her to his base next time. His daughters were also quite close to this little dryad. They would be happy to see her. Still, now was not the right time. After all, His base still had enemies to face. With that promise, Amika settled down, and Mark's group departed. The thing, however, Mark walked out of the settlement with the others instead of directly going back to his base. This move also made the girls confused as to what Mark was planning. It was quite dark, but they all moved towards the east of the new Infanta settlement. Soon, they heard the gushing water as they reached the vicinity of Agos River. Then, looking around, Mark sat down with May on a large rock. "There's only us here. Are you not going to come out?" Mark suddenly called out to everyone's confusion. But then, they became alert as the bushes on the south side of the place they stopped started rustling. And there, a small white fox made its way out of the bushes. The fur of the white fox was beautiful, and its appearance was cute. However, not only that foxes were not endemic to this country, but this white fox had 3 tails. That appearance, however, made Spera flinch. She immediately hid behind Mark and May as if it was natural to do so. The fox looked straight at Mark and the others for several seconds. "Are you done watching?" Mark asked. As if sighing, the fox exhaled a deep breath. Then, bright light enveloped its body, causing everyone to cover their eyes. This light was too bright for this dark environment that was only lit by the moonlight. After the bright light vanished, the fox also disappeared. In the fox's place stood a beautiful woman in white robes. A kitsune, it was what the woman was. The word meant fox in a literal manner, but if used in a paranormal context, the word kitsune would refer to demon foxes and spirit foxes. The appearance of the woman made Spera even more uneasy. "Don't worry. We're here. Nothing will happen," May assured Spera like an older sister. This gesture made Spera nod, though she was still a bit nervous. "It is as she said, Spera. With that man in front of you around, I won't be able to do anything here," the fox woman said with a fearless smile. "So, you have been lurking around all this time. I'm getting annoyed. What do you want?" Mark asked directly. This gesture made the fox woman quite surprised. Most men would flirt, introduce themselves first, and ask for her name after seeing her face. That was how confident she was with her appearance. But seeing May, who sat beside Mark, his reaction became too acceptable to a hateful level. Gathering information. The fox woman replied as direct as Mark's question. "So, you are going to inform those guys that ran away, maybe not?" Mark said. This fox had been around every time he was hunting. That was one of the reasons why Mark held most of his abilities back. However, when he encountered Huo Long Yu this time, it made him realize something. Even though this fox was watching, Huo Long Yu and the others seemed to have no idea who he was. It meant that this fox never reported anything to them. She is Yukine, the vice leader of the Yuki Kitsune, an intelligence group from the Japan branch of Ouroboros, and moved directly under the orders of the Empress. Spera spoke. It seemed that she knew this fox woman. Mark already heard about the Empress from Spera before. After all, before he got her, she was with the members of the Japan branch. The other inheritor, Shin, exchanged some of his merits for Spera's service. Since then, she worked at that branch for a while. And such, Mark also knew that different branches of Ouroboros did not get along. Now that Spera mentioned it, it was clear that this fox woman was not working with the other group that was planning to attack his base. But then, what did the Japan branch of Ouroboros want? It is as Spera said. "I'm gathering information for the Empress," Yukine said with a smile. "And I can attest that our branch might want to cooperate. Though I guess it will be hard to do so." Mark looked at Yukine with a frown. He could tell a bit of what was going on in her mind. Both branches of Ouroboros had the same goal. It was his pure spirit tree. However, the two decided on two opposing approaches. The China branch decided to seize, while the Japanese branch chose cooperation. That was why Yukine was gathering information. It was to see if cooperation was possible. She lurked around the veil of fog, waiting for Mark to appear and see what he was capable of doing. It was not hard for her to realize that Mark could be the real leader of the base, as not everyone could tear open that veil of fog to go in and out of that energy vortex. But this night, an unexpected thing happened for Yukine. It was the appearance of Spera. After the mission that Spera's group had taken to rescue Dop, the group had been missing for a month. It was until recently that the remaining members of that group were retrieved. They were trapped on the edge of the country, filled with injuries that never healed. Even the wisp of Garvlam was only capable of slowing down the festering wounds, or the members would have died already. However, one of the most valuable assets, Spera, was not with them. To see her here meant that they were dealing with the same person that the members of the Japan branch fought before. This situation was a deep headache for Yukine, especially when she already thought that the cooperation was possible. Hearing about cooperation, Mark was quite intrigued, though, after all, it was the first time he had heard about such coming from a member of Ouroboros. All the ones he had dealt with before were all bandits. They only wanted to seize what they wanted. I'm curious. What kind of cooperation does your branch want, and what can you give? Hearing the question, Yukine smiled. I believe that you know that pure spirit trees are not easily found or grown. I will give you some confidential information, but even our organization only had 2 despite having branches in many major countries. Are you planning to have access to the spirit dimension? I bet you know about the chasms there that divide countries and territories? Mark cut her off. Yes, we are aware of that. But that was not our goal. Trade. That is the primary thing we wanted. We needed resources that are only available in that dimension. Not only that. We can trade resources with things you might need, but we can also guarantee one thing. Yukine smiled. Entering this trade with us can ensure that no other branches will try to meddle with your place. That was quite an attractive proposal. However, Mark could not just bite something because of some words. Mark turned to Spera, asking for some explanation. Fortunately, Spera understood what he wanted. Entering an alliance, cooperation, or trade with a branch will make it considered to be its subsidiary, Spera explained. Since there is a strict rule that branches of Ouroboros could not meddle with each other's business, it will stop them from eyeing the subsidiaries. Mark turned to Yukine. She nodded as that was the direct explanation. It was a very enticing proposal. Of course, it was not perfect, as even with that rule, other branches could still meddle in one way or another. It was just that they could not do it blatantly in front of everyone. This situation was very much like what this fox woman was doing right now. She was indirectly meddling with the business of the China branch by observing their target. A pure spirit tree was surely an enticing thing for the organization. Not only that, this would allow them to enter the spirit dimension, but it would also give them a nice amount of resources only available on the other side. It could also allow them to recruit more personnel. For sure, China branch and Japan branch were not the only ones that would be interested in his property. It was just that with the current state of the world, only these 2 branches were able to travel here. Protection, valuable trade, and cooperation, these things were attractive. Anyone would be able to see the value of this proposal. It was a win-win situation for both parties. Mark smiled. It looked like a pleasant one. This smile, however, made Yukine a bit delighted. She thought that he would agree to the proposal. It was despite the conflict that happened between him and the members of her branch. However, as Mark opened his mouth, she froze. I refuse. Now that Yukine knew the meaning of the smile, his pleasant smile did not look as good anymore. Ridicule. Mark was not ridiculing her or her proposal. He aimed at the organization behind her. I'll tell you something you don't know, Mark said as his eyes turned grim. Your organization meddled with my affairs several times already. Worse, that idiot that some called the Great One tried to abduct my wife before. This time, some dumb people from your China branch are harassing my home. Then, they came after someone I valued highly. Then, Mark's eyes turned threatening. If you want cooperation, you better tell your empress to cut ties with the organization. Also, hand over that shin to me, because sooner or later, I will destroy that plaything called Ouroboros. If that time came and your branch is still under that plaything, Don't mind if I destroy you all along with it. Those words echoed in Yukine's ears as a menacing aura almost swallowed her consciousness. Day 125 to 10:22 p.m. Agos River, Mount Malabito, General Nakar, Quezon. Yukine sat on the rocky riverside, playing with her foot on the water. Her white robe lay on the rock beside her, revealing her beautiful visage as a fox spirit in human form. She was a part of the Yuki Kitsune, a group to gather intelligence and information that was directly under the Empress, the leader of the Japanese branch of Ouroboros. Yuki Kitsune was composed of white spirit foxes who were the ones with the most alluring appearances among the spirit foxes. This quirk made it easier for them to deal with people and gather information without getting too much suspicion. Sometimes, their appearance made the people overlook the severity of their questions without using their abilities to charm them. Because of that, no one forced them to act their status. The Yuki Kitsune were free to move and act in any way they wanted as long as they would get their work done fittingly. Furthermore, as spirit foxes feed off the life force of their victims, they were sensitive to these energies, making their job easier. But this time, Yukine, the vice leader of Yuki Kitsune, was having a hard time in her mission. Her mission was to gather information about the several phenomenons that happened in the countries south of Japan. It was not surprising considering how many things had changed during the apocalypse. Still, nothing could cover that the ones that happened in the southeast countries of Asia were among the most earth-shaking. It was earth-shaking in a literal way. Who would have thought that a spirit tree would be born in the mortal world at this time? The latest one before this was already 1,000 years ago. It was at the time way before someone said to have discovered America. There was also the Moria. It was a tree born as a gift from a godly being. However, that person made it that the Moria would not be exploited aside from its fruits. Thus, it had far lesser capabilities, consciousness, and intelligence compared to the ones planted by powerful entities. It was nothing more than an ancient tree that continued to exist for religious purposes. This time, after a long time, a pure spirit tree appeared. And it was a fully grown one. Of course, everyone that was able to would try to contend for it no matter how much they sacrifice. That was what the China branch of Ouroboros was doing. Furthermore, they took an interest in the resources that the base that harbored the pure spirit tree had. As for the Japan branch, aside from trying to take over the remains of Japan, it had a far lesser interest outside their jurisdiction. Unlike the Empire of Japan, led by humans, that tried to colonize as many countries as they could, the members of the Japan branch did not aim for that scale. Nevertheless, endeavors like this would interest them, trading and such. That was why Yukine gave out that proposal. She was very sure that her empress would agree with it too. But the main reason for this was different. It was because, unlike most humans, Yukine could not read what was going on in that person's mind. The owner of the spirit tree that she had observed in these past days was not something to be taken lightly. She followed him every time he came out, and he also just left her alone until now. The reason might be because the current plan of the China branch to involve innocent people angered him. And thus, she finally managed to meet the entity named Mark. For the result, however, she wished that she knew more before this. What she received was a direct threat and a declaration of war towards the organization. Because of the outbreak, their information gathering had been slower. Although the Japan branch knew that some branches started to move against weaker countries, they were not able to gather their accurate plans. When Shin's group accepted the rescue mission, they only knew that the plans of Ouroboros in Bay City had failed. They did not know what the exact plans were or who was in charge of the mission. It only came to light when the Great One had gone missing. The Great One, he was not just some random leader or character in the organization. Among the 13 founders of Ouroboros, he was the 8th. The weakest among the 13 was a lower deity, while the Great One was just a few steps away from being a higher deity. All the branches of Ouroboros had contact with all the founders through magical means. And they all knew that they lost contact with the Great One due to an unknown reason. It came to light that he led the mission in Bay City directly. Although he could not go physically, he was able to due to the use of small ritual portals. Not to mention that the current founders could not leave their personal spaces due to a reason unknown to everyone. And in that mission, the Great One led, something severe might have happened. The other founders could tell that he was still alive. However, any form of contact was not possible. Now, Yukine gained a valuable but threatening piece of information. The cause of what happened to the Great One was the person the China branch was currently facing. Yukine sighed. She remembered the sentences she spoke to Tan Saitong before she left. Those words were nothing much but a play despite having some truth in it. Now, she could not even believe that her words would not come true. Furthermore, she tried to use this opportunity to measure his strength, as the Jiangshis that Tan Saitong brought were well-known warriors. But even with that, she could tell that he was holding back. This situation made it harder for her to gauge things accurately. What should I report to the Empress? Incomplete reports like this were unacceptable for her. While she was thinking deeply while looking at her reflection on the river water, she heard a loud flap of wings. What could you be thinking too deeply, milady? A middle-aged voice echoed from behind her. Kuki. Yukine spoke. Yes, milady? The voice from behind replied. What will you do if someone gave a declaration of war to the organization? The voice hummed. That depends, milady. Just answer. Yukine pressed. The person should be a powerful one if someone was able to declare something like that. In that case, it depends on whether the person is a slaughterer or not, or if we offended him or not. At the moment, our branch is avoiding conflict as we stabilize our condition. If that person would not slaughter everyone just because they were a part of the organization, then I will not join the battle. On the other hand, I would fight. If he stepped into our with the goal to slaughter, I would kill him. But if he was stronger, I will still fight and let you, milady, and the Empress, escape. You're not going to escape? Yukine asked. I will not. The voice confidently replied. Your answers are very like you, Kuki. Yukine smiled as she turned her head to the side to see behind her. There, a tall, muscular man wearing an old Japanese attire stood. He was wearing large beads on his neck and a small hat on his head. His long white hair and beard waved with the wind. He looked like a human. However, he had a red-colored skin, a very long nose, and the black feathered wings of a crow were present on his back. He was a Tengu, a powerful being in Japanese legends. Are you here to pick me up, Kuki? Yes, milady. An oracle came. This place will be a battlefield. That is why the Empress immediately sent me to pick milady up in return. Hearing that, Yukine was a bit surprised. For an oracle to come at this moment, but I am confused. Isn't it just a small group from the China branch that are here? Those words of Yukine made Kuki shake his head. We already received milady's initial report a few days ago. How was it now? Hearing that, Yukine told Kuki about Tan Saitong and the movements they made after the vice leader of China branch arrived. She also told him about her speculations in the current battle. The information Kuki received caused a frown on his already scary face. I could not understand it too, milady. If it is just as you said, the current forces of China branch here were not enough to cause an oracle. The two felt confused as to how mysterious it was. Oracles would not easily come, especially to events unrelated to them. For an oracle to appear, it should either be a catastrophic event or something directly related to the person receiving it. As Yukine was nothing but an observer here, a third party, she was not directly related. Then, the oracle meant that it was the former. A catastrophic event was about to happen. Realizing this, Yukine became distraught. Her determination to cooperate had not waned at all. Maybe, she could use this as a bargaining chip? But then, she was directly interfering with the business of the other branch then. She needed to wait after the China branch left defeated. But then, what if the catastrophe would happen before that? This is the first time I saw milady having such expressions in a long while. Kuki smiled. The vice leader of Yuki Kitsune, it was a big task given to Yukine. Because of that, the playful fox before decided to become a proper intelligence agent afterward. She mostly tried to hide her expressions, as it was not a good role model for those below her. Yukine also gained merit after merit, which gave her more popularity that even surpassed the current leader of the Yuki Kitsune. Of course, it was not like she was not admired by many before all these. Just give your word, milady. Maybe, I am here to pick you up, but you can always choose when you want to leave. Kuki smiled. Hearing that, Yukine took a deep breath. Well, then. She smiled. Can you accompany me here for a while? I want to see the battle that will happen soon. If the catastrophe really struck, it's not late to leave since you are here. Kuki looked at Yukine. He could not tell whether she wanted to gather more information or was just plainly interested in what will happen. But even if it was the latter, it was still fine, Kuki thought. There was barely anything that actually made Yukine interested. That was why Kuki was quite supportive of it. Still, milady, the moment that I deduce that it is getting dangerous, please pardon me if I dragged you back. Are you afraid? You're strong, right? Yukine teased. And to that, Kuki stared at the white fox woman with a stern expression. Milady, I am not afraid of any enemy. What I am afraid of is you getting into danger that you can't deal on your own. This might be one of those times. Remember that the oracle of your clan never made any wrong predictions. Seeing that expression, even Yukine felt goosebumps. She knew that Kuki was only thinking of her well-being. Thus, she could only sigh. All right. You're free to take me back at that time. I will not resist it. As you wish, milady. No, Kuki said as he kneeled on one knee. As you wish, princess. Seeing that, Yukine shrugged her shoulders. Stop that, Kuki. I'm currently on duty. I don't even dare call the Empress as my mother at times like this. Family and work in the organization is separate, remember? Yukine reprimanded Kuki. Yes, I understand, milady. Day 126 to 12:51 a.m. Mountain Base, Mount Malabito, General Nakar, Quezon. Mark lay on the bed, awake, and was thinking about things deeply. The things he said to the fox woman, he was not joking about any of it. He planned to wage war against Ouroboros since the time they tried to touch May. Nevertheless, he was still not sure how he would do it. After all, it was not just some local syndicate but an international secret organization. If not for the apocalypse that started, he might have never heard anything about it. Adding every information he had about the organization and the things he learned and experienced, there was one thing that he concluded. Unless he had someone in the inner circle of the organization to get some information, it would be hard to destroy that group they call Ouroboros. If he could not take out the enemy straight from its roots, it would be just like where this organization got its name. The Ouroboros. Their end would just become another beginning. The most crucial thing in uprooting this gigantic tree was something he learned after meeting Bathala. As Ouroboros was an organization mainly composed of non-humans, it would not be surprising if the main person behind it might also be a former god. If that was the case, the issue was not fighting, but how to find that person. Bathala had his own space that even the observer could not find him. It could also be possible that the ringleader of Ouroboros was the same. Furthermore, there might not be just one. Maybe, there was more. The fact that the Great One that he encountered before was stronger than the deity of bloodshed was also there. This idea meant that he might need to find several dimension pockets that he had no idea where to find. Huh. Mark sighed. There were very few times that his emotions manifested and affected him. What happened earlier was one of those times. After all, he saw how Amika suffered in his vision. Even though he managed to thwart the threat, he still saw it. That was why when someone from the same organization that tried to harm his valued people proposed cooperation, he was infuriated. Furthermore, quite an amount of the emotions he absorbed from others leaked out at that time. It caused even May and the others to feel a bit suffocated. Even the anger he felt back when he saw how everyone died in Bay City came back. Affected by those deep-seated emotions, he immediately rejected the proposal without thinking. Now that he calmed down, he knew that while it was an honest declaration, it was the most inefficient decision. Maybe he should have accepted it first, used the connections, and slowly tracked down the roots of the organization. Well, it was too late now. All he could do now was kill everything from that organization that would block his path, and while slowly tracing the source. Thinking about it, it was not bad at all. Just how frustrated the organization would become when things started to sway away from their favor. Deciding that he would just leave things for the future and face the current situation, Mark closed his eyes. However, it seemed like there was still no time for him to sleep at all. Opening his eyes with a frown, he slowly removed May's arms wrapped on his body. Then, without trying to wake her up, he vanished from the bed with a puff of black mist. Appearing and disappearing throughout the base, Mark arrived at the quite unlikely place he would go. The house Huey and the others built for the tribe elder and her grandchildren. It was not like he did not like to go here, but as the elder was already too old, it was better for her if there was not too much disturbance around her. This time, however, Mark had no choice but to go. As Mark appeared outside the door abruptly opened. The granddaughter ran out in panic and immediately bumped onto Mark. Being a regular person, even though she was the one who charged with momentum, she was the one who fell on her bottom. Nevertheless, she did not feel the pain. When she saw that it was Mark who she ran into, she immediately stood up and cried out, "Master! My grandmother!" Tears were pouring out of her eyes. Sure enough, something unwanted happened. Mark did not speak and calmly entered the house. The house was rather small and simple. It was by the request of the elder, as there were only 3 of them living there. As such, after entering the door, Mark could see the elder that was lying down on the bed without moving. The grandson sat beside the bed. Unlike his sister, he was still calm. However, the worry in his eyes was present. As Mark entered, the elder opened her eyes and slowly turned her head. "You have come," the elder said with a smile that was lighted by the glowing blood metal installed on the ceiling. With a frown, Mark approached. "Just what did you do?" he asked. His voice was serene and a bit upset. "Ha ha." The elder let out a short laugh. "I felt that something is not right even though I am not receiving an oracle for some reason. That is why I tried to force myself to see why." Cough. Cough. "Grandmother." The elder coughed hard, making her 2 grandchildren panicked. The 2 called out loud because the elder started to cough out blood. Mark, on the other hand, looked calm. It was already inevitable. As the elder was still not able to pass on her ability, despite her old age, she was still alive. Now, however, it seemed that she tried to touch something that she should not. The protection from her ability could not stop it anymore, and her life was waning slowly. "Why did you force it?" After a glimpse, there was still time to retreat, right? Mark asked. The elder let her granddaughter wipe the blood off from her mouth and replied weakly, "Because I saw a glimpse of our demise. After seeing that, anyone will want to see more." That made Mark frown even more. "A man shrouded in a black haze. He will arrive when everyone less expected. He seemed to have some history with you and your wife. I know that you wanted to train your people to fight using the current enemies. But now is not the right time." The elder turned towards the ceiling. "What I saw. You might be able to save your family and close people. But the others, my grandchildren. You are too occupied at the battle. You did not notice." Mark did not know what to say. If it was the case, then, no wonder that he did not receive any vision about it. The people in the base were important as manpower. However, they were not as important as people who he was close to. His relationship with them was not enough to trigger his vision. So that was why the elder forced it. The value of her life was gone a long time ago. She was already past her time. And to her, the lives of her grandchildren were far more valuable. The words of the elder was getting cryptic. Nevertheless, Mark got the gist of it. Whoever the man covered in a black haze was, he was planning for a sneak attack. When his attention was on the battlefield, the enemy would try to eliminate his people. Mark wanted more and explicit information. However, the elder had already closed her eyes. She was still alive. However, she was likely not to last till morning. With her eyes closed, she spoke one last time. My only regret is that the powers that flowed through the blood of our family will end at my time. I don't know how I am going to apologize to our ancestors. After those words, the elder finally lost her consciousness. The two grandchildren called out to their grandmother in tears. However, no matter how they shout, she did not respond. You two should cherish your last night with her, Mark said and was about to return. No, my grandmother, she will live, don't lie. The granddaughter cried out loud, shouting at Mark. With a serious look, Mark replied, your grandmother was already past her time because of you two. Learn to take care of yourself and your brother already. No. Grandmother said that the enemy had a history with you, it's your fault that this happened. Don't be unreasonable, Mark said with a glare. That glare made the girl step back. This is my place, I can kick you two and your tribe out anytime I want. I can't say that you can't blame anyone, but be reasonable. This is no one's fault. Your grandmother did this to protect you too. Don't put her decision in vain. With those words, Mark did not wait for a reply. He walked out of the door without closing it. Mark could understand the sorrow of the two kids. It was too overwhelming that they began to lose reasoning. Aside from their grandmother, they did not have any relatives left. They saw their parents die in front of them and managed to hold on because of their grandmother. And Mark, who could absorb their emotions, was having a hard time resisting it. He needed to get away as soon as possible until the two stabilized their minds. I never expected that I will witness something like this again, and for it to happen here in the mortal world. The seductive voice of a woman was heard after Mark went out of the door. What are you doing here? Mark asked as he looked at the slave dryad that he brought back from the spirit dimension. I felt a burst of life force, so I came here, my dear master. Don't address me like that. Also, what do you know about this? Mark warned, along with a question he wanted to ask. It seemed that this dryad knew about oracles, or else, she would not be attracted here. Okay. She sighed. You see, I saw something like this before. You know, oracles are not fortune tellers. They are given omens and prophecies at random from the so-called string of fate. But they never should try to go beyond that. They are not like clairvoyant people that can see into the future. However, there are times that more experienced oracles can force to see the future. Then, the dryad turned to the house of the elder. Like she did, as I said, I felt a burst of life force. That is why I came here. For oracles capable of this, they needed to pay their life force. That old woman there is already past her time like you said. She had no life force to pay. That is why the protection from her bloodline was broken. It looks like she was aware of this, but still did it. With a shrug, the dryad shook her head. I don't understand you, humans. Mark heard enough. And thus, he walked away, but nevertheless, he left a few words to the dryad. It's not being human is that you don't understand, it's having a family of your own. With those words, Mark vanished from the sight of the dryad. She turned back to the house, she could still hear the wailing of the two grandchildren. She mulled over the words she had just heard. Yup, I don't understand. The dryad murmured as she walked away back to where she was staying. Mark appeared on the branch of the Night Everard spirit tree. He looked over the base below and then, towards the veil of fog that covered the whole place. I really hate it when things don't go as planned, he murmured. A new threat was waiting. Or was it an old one? Nevertheless, it seemed like he should not wait for the enemy to come and take the initiative instead. But as he thought that, he frowned once more. The vortex of magical energy that continuously gathered mana started to slow down. It was already too late to take the initiative. As vortex waned, it might stop by morning. At that time, the fog and energy around would start to dissipate. And that was the countdown for the confrontation to start.